moving on to Infrascale Backup and Disaster Recovery, and I'm going to use its acronym IBDR frequently. Our goal, eliminate downtime and data loss. So let's start with definitions. So I know you're all storage professionals, you all understand disaster recovery, but for everyone, I want to set a baseline definition. We'll set disaster recovery as the ability to resume your business operations after some type of disruption, whether that's natural disaster, cyber attack, or human created. Our product, Infrascale Backup and Disaster Recovery, by name, is first a hybrid cloud solution. So we are focused first and foremost on the on-premises solutions that you have that need data protection. We solve, and by putting hardware or software on premises side by side with your workloads to be protected, and we couple that with service infrastructure in the cloud, so SaaS, one part IaaS, one part SaaS. And that hybrid cloud solution is actually doing the duty of disaster recovery. So disaster recovery as a service. And in that vein, we're doing primarily three things. We're backing up and replicating data to a secondary or multiple locations. We are allowing the recovery of those data sets or data workloads in the form of files and folders, or spinning up your entire infrastructure. And we can do that because we're doing multiple location replication, either on premises or in the cloud. And then last but not least, and almost always universally overlooked, is the ability to fail back after the disaster is over. So these three things, backup and replication, recovery, failback, those are exactly how we're going to organize our demos for you today. So definitions first. This is what the product is. I want to move to what our goals are for this product. So in the capacity of, okay, here's what it is, but why is it? So at the end of the day, we are still talking about critical data. We are talking about in the event of disaster, what is this product going to do? The first is to be fast. We need to ensure that whatever data and data operations exist for this business, that we help that customer quickly get back so that they have the least amount of disruption as possible. And we have some features around that. Second, we want to ensure that there's confidence in our solution. So that can take many forms: confidence that the backups are working, or confidence that actually to test or to actually fail over is not going to be something that you have to sign paperwork for. You don't have to pay overages. None of that's going to occur. We want to ensure that this is a solution that instills confidence for our customers that they have DR handled. And last but not least is something around peace of mind in terms of its management. So whether we're deploying—
Hey, Brian.
Yes, sir.
The DR, unlimited DR and failover testing, all that stuff, typically requires resources equivalent to, an infrastructure environment that you're backing up or providing disaster recovery for. Is that stuff that you have sitting in the cloud that you could spin up on demand, or is that something you have elsewhere, or how is this, it doesn't—
If you hold on a couple more slides, I'm going to have the answer for you.
All right, thanks, Brian.
And especially around scale, we're going to have some stories for you in the last section. So if I don't get to that answer, come back to me.
Okay.
Okay. So goal-wise, fast return to operability, confidence, and then around making sure whatever is being backed up, that we do it the easiest way. Whatever you're spinning up, that you can restore it as quickly as possible. And when you're setting it up, it's just plain easy to deploy. Here are our goals. So I'm going to double click one more time. We've defined it. We've said, here's what we're trying to do. Infrascale Backup and Disaster Recovery actually has four distinct, I'll call them flavors of this product that have different capabilities to them. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side in our range of opportunities. We have something called IBDR on premises. This is a simple backup appliance. It is not giving you DR, it's giving you backup on-prem side by side with your source servers. moving one step over, IBDR local. This is actually a hybrid cloud backup solution. So not only are we doing the backup of those servers, whether it's the images and the files and the folders, we're also then archiving it to the cloud. So we're doing backup to two locations, your on-premise appliance and your cloud appliance. And from a recovery perspective, allowing you to recover files and folders or images from either, but spinning up only locally. That is IBDR local. IBDR Cloud, which is our primary product and the one that we're going to focus on today for the discussion and making sure that we're in the realm of DRaaS, is the DRaaS product. This is spin up either local or cloud, everything that you saw with IBDR local. And then last but not least, if our cloud is not where you want to have your secondary instance, you can, as a customer or a managed service provider helping that customer, solve it in your own cloud. And this is a disaster recovery product. This is the IBDR paired on-prem solution.
So Brian, where's the storage or the secondary storage that the backups occur to? I mean, is that on-prem in the IBDR on-prem? Is it in the cloud? Is it storage that you guys are providing as part of your appliance, whether it's software or hardware, or is it external storage to the appliance?
Right. So we're going to show you on the little next slide how this looks, but think about it this way. You have servers on-prem. We're going to put an appliance, whether it's software only or software hardware, side by side. You're going to replicate data to that appliance. In the case of IBDR on-prem, that's all you get. In the case of IBDR local, you're replicating to that primary appliance and you're replicating to a cloud secondary.
So the storage is in the appliance effectively.
The storage is in both locations. So there'll be storage at the appliance here or here. And in the cloud, you need to think about it more like cloud instances and cloud storage. In IBDR cloud, it's the same. And then in the case of IBDR paired on-prem, and there's multiple ways this can be solved, but there's resources in site one and there's resources in site two. Those can either be supplied by us or they can be supplied by the customer. We're selling the software that allows them to do the disaster recovery technology.
All right, thanks.
Great. Okay, so we kind of skipped ahead just a little bit, but I'm actually going to turn the reins of this presentation over to Chris Bayne, our Chief Solutions Architect, and he's going to walk you through that multi-destination replication with cloud local recovery.
So thank you, Brian, for that introduction. And yeah, absolutely. Let's jump into what the solution actually looks like. So what's the primary goal of any DR solution, right? So number one, we want to be able to protect whether it's physical or virtual servers, but we want to be able to take all that data, protect it, and get it back up and running for those customers. Now, how do we do that? Well, here we have our primary on-premise machine. So that can either be, as Brian was saying, a virtual or a physical machine. And what that's going to do is it's going to back everything up to that device. And that's going to give you local backup and recovery. So that's where the B in the IBDR comes from. And then it's also going to give you local disaster recovery. So that's going to allow you to boot up any of those VMs or virtual machines that are running local or physical machines if you had a hardware failure and get them back up and running very quickly. I like to call this kind of TiVoing or DVRing your disaster, so you can control when that outage is. Now in our secondaries, that's something that Ray was actually asking about. So when we look at our secondaries, typically it runs up in the Infrascale cloud. And when we do that, we give you a dedicated set of resources that you can always access. So you can always test and run and use them. So the secondaries are, generally hosted in our environment, but as we were talking about, you could host it in your own environment. So if you had some special compliance needs where it needs to be in your own data center or GPDR or something like that, we do provide for that. And then last but not least, number 4, everything's managed through the Infrascale dashboard, which we'll look at later, but that allows us to manage multiple customers, multiple locations, multiple solutions. So anything that Infrascale offers, you can manage through that single pane of glass through the dashboard, which is really great because I've been in this for over 20 years and a lot of the companies I work for, different portals for each customer and different portals for each software product. And it's really great that Infrascale kind of drills that all down into one management solution.
So first of all, about a primary backup target, okay? So usually when you talk about a backup target, everybody is now worried about ransomware attacks. Okay, so how this appliance is organized to be, ransomware resilient. Yeah. And the second is when you talk about Infrascale Cloud, does it mean your data center, your infrastructure, or is it a third-party infrastructure like AWS, Azure, or whatever you like?
Okay, so absolutely. When we look at that and we're talking about it, so the big term right now is there's two big terms right now: immutable backups and air gapping, right? And when we look at the Infrascale solution here, we can actually look at we're backing everything up onto our appliance, which is running a hardened version of a Linux OS. So if we look at standard ransomwares where they're just going to go out and creep the network and encrypt CIF shares and stuff like that, we're not vulnerable to that, right? We don't have CIF shares to encrypt those backups. Now, another part is we're actually replicating using our block level dedupe from on-prem to the cloud. So that's another proprietary method that we have for moving that data from local to the cloud. So there wouldn't be an easy way for them to be able to encrypt the local data and then further encrypt the data that's in the cloud. Now, another part of the way that we handle this is every time we do a backup, we're doing block level differentials. So we're looking at the blocks that are different. So even if the data got encrypted, we would just store that as a different point in time to be able to recover that data. And we can also boot multiple backups. And we'll get into that later, where we can look and see when the last good point in time was that we had for the backups to be able to be recovered.
The second question was about Infrascale Cloud. So is it your, because in the past it was your infrastructure. Now,
correct.
I don't know.
So it's still our infrastructure. It's actually out in Salt Lake City. It's a big data center that we have a rack in. We're next to major players in the industry. So as far as that, we do have multiple data centers throughout the US, which we can cover later if you want to talk about where the different data centers are. But that's also why we offer the ability for them to host their own secondaries, just in case our Salt Lake data center doesn't meet the qualifications that they want.
Do you have any data center, any
European?
We actually have 3 data centers for IBDR. One, as Chris said, is in Salt Lake. The second is in Toronto, and the third is in Nottingham, UK. And then for the geographies, because you're asking about Europe, beyond that, that's where our IBDR paired on-prem solution is best for that use case.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Chris, I'm just going to jump back in. My question wasn't along those lines. It was about the portal that you're using to manage all this stuff. So you're saying that as an MSP, I can have an overview of all of my clients and see how things are going for them. Do the clients have their own subset of stuff into going there, or are we just giving them reports? What's the visual from the client side, the end user side, or end client side, I guess?
So we actually do have a demo coming up later where we're going to go over the dashboard and we're going to show that. But so it's up to you. So a lot of MSPs manage things differently. Like some are like, I don't want my customers to see what's going on. And you have the option not to give them credentials. But if maybe they have some IT staff and they're fairly competent, you can give them credentials and they can log in and see what's going on with their own. And it's also role-based. So you can control what they can do. So can they just view it? Can they modify? Can they do restores? So it's really up to how you want to manage your end users as to how you want to set that up.
Just a follow-up question: that is the primary appliance, is the data deduped, compressed, and encrypted on that appliance as well as in the Infrascale cloud, or is it?
It is.
Okay, wasn't apparent on the slide. Thanks.
Yeah, we're going to cover that in 2 slides. So Chris, do you want to get to your demos?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump in.
Okay.
So the first one we're going to look at here is this is around the setup and configuration of this device, right? So here we can easily see we're on our default dashboard for the appliance. We can see how many jobs were successful, how many failed. So it's a great way on Monday for them to come in and take a look and see, all right, how is my customer doing? Now, when we want to set up backups, here we can come in, and for VMware, we simply put in the IP address for the ESX or the vCenter server, put in the user credentials, and we're up and backing things up. With Hyper-V, it's the same way. We have full integration with Hyper-V also, so we can do agentless backups. Now, when we take a look here at our default screen, we can see a lot of information about how it's being backed up. But one of the important questions I often get is, all right, well, what's our retentions? So here we can configure our default retentions. We're using kind of a grandfather, father, son rotation. So we're going to keep so many backups for a certain amount of time, so many weeks, so many months, so many years. And then here we also have our default schedules that we can set up. Now we can go down and we can tune these individually per client. We can set up as many retention policies or schedules as we want to. So we have full flexibility on how long we want to protect that data and how frequently. Now, one of my favorite features that we can look at here is, one, we can not only see when the last successful backup was, but we can also see proof that that last successful backup was actually successful. So again, I've been in this for over 20 years. There's been many times where people went to go restore a server and they found out 6 months later, well, it's been airing out and we haven't had good backups for 6 months. With us, we give you this visual proof, and it's an easy way to verify that everything's up and running, the backups are working the way you expect, and you can trust that data is there for you to be able to recover.
One question: are you able to add custom validation steps post, server power on, like looking for services that turn on, custom scripts with different error messages, things like that?
So currently, we're actually just looking at some of the default system services to verify that the server came online and everything was good. But that is something that we are looking at.
Okay, cool.
Let's recap. So we talked about what are we backing up? We're backing either physical servers or VMs, and we have specific integration with VMware and Hyper-V. We're actually capturing, and this was the question earlier, we're capturing change blocks, and as our technology does it, every time we capture it, it actually can be formed as a synthetic full. So even though we're capturing the blocks, deduplicating, we actually recompose that to a synthetic full. I'll cover that in just a second. For the data, we are, for IBDR Cloud, replicating to 2 locations, both to the primary, from the original source to the primary, deduplicate, compress, encrypt, share it with the secondary as a deduplicated, encrypted, and compressed as well. And that is always the way that we are storing and transferring data from a safety perspective. As for retention, Chris demoed that our default retention policies are modifiable. They are flexible, fully configurable. Our backup scheduling, or RPOs, are also configurable to your liking. Most of our customers are either once or twice a day. We do have the opportunity here then to do unlimited restore points where the customer just needs to manage storage, but that's pretty easy because we're not capturing all the data. We've got the deduplication happening. And there are something Chris did not get to demo, is additional capabilities around replication control. As they can finish their replication, maybe they do backup twice a day, but maybe they only want to send it to the cloud once. And this allows further the ability to control the network bandwidth.
I'm trying to understand what unlimited restore points per managed storage really means. You're not talking about continuous data protection here.
No.
You're talking about the fact that the storage that's provided to the appliance to store the backups can be anything the customer wishes to have.
Yes. So if they set very frequent backup schedule and long retention, they will need to manage their storage. That's the parentheticals. So we provide the ability to capture and manage unlimited. They just need to watch how they control their storage, which is why the next bullet down was about replication controls and controlling of storage, et cetera. So after all, we are talking about resources for the primary appliance. It is a physical device. It has X amount of storage, and we'll talk about how it flexes. But at some point in time, the primary device is not where you want to grow. You want to grow in the cloud.
Got it. Thanks.
Great. So a few things that are a little unique about us. Chris had mentioned this a little bit earlier. We do have agentless and native support for both VMware and Hyper-V. So this is allowing for the discovery, all the policy control around the VMs, backup VMs that are off, backup VMs that are newly created after the initial setup. Those are capabilities we have. We are, with the change blocks, capturing images, but that allows us to do file and folder backup and restore as well. And then in this technology that we have, It is global deduplication. So if you have multiple Windows servers and the baseline of the OS is the same, we're globally deduplicating across all of that for you, which is another reason that we're actually maximizing the storage utilization. So minimizing the storage in another way. And this is also ideal for low bandwidth environments, which will come out in some of the user stories we have in a few minutes. Last but not least is the proof of backup, right? So one of our goals, right, was to ensure that customers felt confident in the solution. This is a confidence builder. Chris?
On that proof of backup boot verification, is that systematic or an option you can turn on or off depending on the client requirements?
It's an option that you can turn on or off. So
Okay.
at the per client level, and you can also schedule what time you want it to happen. But what's great about the way that our solution works, if you're using physical hardware that came from us, we're doing the boot verification off of your production gear. So it's not causing any kind of performance impact at all.
That was my next question. So you're actually running this internally on the box you supply. So I bring all the
Correct.
data
We're
in,
running
I
our
boot it on.
own hypervisor. So two things I want to bring up. One, when we do a physical backup, we do a physical to virtual conversion. So even if it's a physical machine, we can boot it up on top of our appliance. So that's one of the points that, kind of makes us unique and makes us, kind of fun and exciting. And then the other option is when we're doing these replications and we're doing the dedupe backups and block level dedupe on our proprietary technology, we actually do provide you the ability to seed that data. So if we had a customer, and I deal with a lot of Latin American customers that have limited bandwidth, they like to pre-seed the data, ship it to us, and then we'll load it. And that way they only have to replicate from that point in time, not from, all of their 10 terabytes of data that they have. So that's one of the options that we do provide that's built into the solution.
The backup is agentless. How do you handle the special cases like databases and Active Directory?
So if you want to do something like SQL or Exchange or something that requires an agent, we do provide an agent, and you can install that on physical or virtual machines, and that gives you that application level integration. So you can actually go in and pick individual databases you want to back up or mailboxes. Now, typically, I recommend against that. That's just my personal preference. And the reason why is you can boot up a SQL server on top of our appliance off the network and easily use SQL tools to export databases or tables or whatever you want, and then import it into your production server. So the ability to do that is kind of a legacy way of thinking, I think. But we do support it fully for Exchange and SQL and stuff like that. You can install the agent and back it up using native APIs for those applications.
Chris, we're leaking into the restore territory. Let's start restore, and I think it'll resolve a few more of these questions.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump over. So when we look at doing restores, there's really 3 different ways to restore your data, right? There's kind of the traditional way we'll look at first here. So I want to browse and restore files. What that's going to let me do is go pick any point in time that I have backups from. And then I can do the VMDKs, the contained files, or application data as you were asking about. So for here, we'll do contained files, which gives me that granular restore. And what that's going to do is it's going to mount that image. And then I can go out through this Windows Explorer kind of interface and go and pick and choose what files I want to recover. So if I want to recover an individual file, I can just click on it. It'll download it via my web browser. Or I could go and click on any of these directories download buttons, or I could put it on an appliance network share. So if I have a user that's not entirely sure what file they need back, I could just restore it to that network share, and they could go browse and get it back. Now next, what if that machine died? We had a patch or something go wrong. Well, now we can go into recovery, and now what do I want to do? Replace the existing machine or create a new one? What data store do I want to put it on in my VMware environment? So again, this is going to restore directly back to your VMware environment. What do we want to name it in that VMware environment? And then last but not least, when it's done, do I want to power it on or do I want to give it networking? Now, the fastest way to get things back up and running is to come over to our boot tab. And here you can pick and choose any of the machines you're protecting and go ahead and boot them up on top of the appliance. Now here we can name them, choose the resources, RAM and CPU, what network we want to put them on. And then we click boot. It's going to go ahead and boot it up on top of our appliance using our hypervisor. So here we can see it's coming up, and even though we gave it no networking, it's still going to give us a VNC address that's encrypted that allows us to connect to that machine and be able to do testing or make sure that that machine's up and running as we expected. So with that, I'll pause and see if we have some questions.
So Chris, the question I have, when you start mounting restores as files and you actually start, doing a boot, the restores themselves have to become rewritable in order to be able to, support the boot process and whatever the application is doing and that sort of thing. So when does the translation or transformation between an immutable backup and a read-writable backup occur? And when you're booting and this sort of stuff, are you pointing to the restore? Have you cloned the restore? That sort of question.
So in this, great question. So in this particular example, when we do a boot, we're actually cloning that restore. So that's an independent image that we can then later shut down, delete, do whatever we want to. Choose to get that data back if maybe we were running on top of the appliance and we wanted to do a recovery of data from running on top of our appliances. So it's at the time that you boot it that we have to make it read write so that the machine, of course, can come up, right? There's swap files, there's all kinds of stuff that it needs to do. Now, when we're just doing a regular restore, then it's still mounted as a read only, and it's pushing the data to a secondary location.
Okay, let's recap restore. So files and folders or VMs, we're doing it either for file and folder browse and restore, we're doing replication back to the primary or back to the original hypervisor source. And in most cases, if in the event of disaster, we're actually going to boot, and we'll boot local or in the cloud. And as Chris alluded to here, we've got security. Each one of our customers' cloud environments are actually inside their own private network inside our cloud, secure RDP or VNC access to them, and different types of options to boot. As Chris said, you can either choose to network it or not network it at the end. And we actually give you the capability of sandboxing it in a isolated subnet or put it on the subnet for disaster recovery and then securely VPN for it. What's different for us is we are providing the ability to boot in both locations, either on premises or in the cloud. The way that we are storing that data, and the question that was just asked, that synthetic full being reassembled on demand lets us have those unlimited copies and versions. That process is very, very fast to get to the point of booting. So our average is roughly 2 minutes average for boot ready, and 80th percentile is 10 minutes or less for actually being booted. But of course, we're dependent on what the actual VM is doing.
Brian,
Yes.
You might cover that on the next section, but this is sort of about a granular restore of individual VMs. Is there no, I'll need to be careful with my language, being Australian, fork, no, restore all the things button?
Yes, and that's what I'm calling the orchestration.
Fabulous. Okay.
And you'll see a demo of that.
Great. Thanks.
Great.
Okay. Another question here. You mentioned running your own hypervisor. If you run the VM on your appliance, but that also means you actually have to convert it from the VM version, whatever, if it's Hyper-V or VMware or whatever, and run it in your own hypervisor while doing the restore, booting it up.
So,
how do you convert that? Also, a secondary question to that is, can you actually use this software to convert from one hypervisor to another? I mean, restore a Hyper-V VM to a VMware rig or vice versa.
So when we do the backups, whether it's a VMware, Hyper-V, or physical, we actually do a conversion to make it so that it can boot on top of our appliance. So when you come in and do a boot, we don't have to do the conversion at that point. We're already ready to boot it up and get it up and running. And then absolutely, we have different methods for being able to back up from one different hypervisor and restore it to a different one. So we do have methods for doing that. Now, natively, a lot of those tools have them built in, which are, I would say, the better route to go is to use VMware's VMware converter or something like that to be able to migrate stuff. But we're absolutely a supported platform for being able to do that. And we're actually supported by even like Nutanix and some of the outliers to be able to convert from one platform to a different one.
Right. So if I restore a VM, it's not actually the VM I backed up because you converted it first.
So it's actually the same block level VM that we had. The only thing we did was when we backed it up, we grabbed the configuration files so that when we boot it on top of our machine, we can quickly inject those drivers and bring it up online. So that's the only thing we're doing is when we power on a virtual machine is we are injecting some drivers for our hypervisor.
Which is KVM?
It is.
Okay.
All right.
And Chris or Brian, so, in a true disaster recovery scenario, I'm going to be running these applications for multiple hours or days in your hypervisor. There's lots of things that, these sorts of applications can depend upon within, VMware, Nutanix, Hyper-V that I just don't understand how sophisticated your hypervisor is with respect to these things. Dynamic resource scheduling, HA, those sorts of things. So if I'm running a full disaster, activity sitting in your infrastructure, how's that going to play out?
If you're running
it's not
a full
running
disaster,
VMware, it's not running Hyper-V, it's not running Nutanix, right?
Correct. So if you're running a full disaster, then we're going to assume that your primary site's down, right? It's not just a couple of machines. So that infrastructure is already gone. Now you're going to be running up inside of our cloud. So in our cloud, we have all the resources to be able to boot and run all those machines, but it's not going to have the same redundancy that your local environment does with VMware clustering or something like that.
The third demo here that Chris had was Failback. And the preconditions for this demo, right, are something bad has happened and a DR plan has been invoked. We have recovered VMs, perhaps the entire infrastructure booted in the cloud infrastructure, and all operations are running. On-prem, though, we have re-prepared the data center, the environment, the Infrascale appliance is ready, and the source systems are ready. So how does and what are the steps for Failback to occur? So it's as simple as this: 1, 2, 3. In the cloud, we're going to shut down those VMs. We're going to back them up. So the secondary has the latest and greatest copy in a pause state. From that secondary, we're going to replicate it back from the secondary to the primary. And now the primary has the latest copy. And on the primary, you have a choice. Depending on what the Failback plan looks like, you can either boot on the primary or you can then restore the VM image all the way back. So in this capacity, Failback has these 1, 2, 3 steps, which are essentially the logical things to get those bits and bytes copied back down to the original source.
This is probably one of the steps I like to point out just because this is something in the 20 years I've been doing this where failing back has always been complicated. And normally you have to talk to the vendor and have them do some special stuff and maybe open a support case. With us, it's something you can easily do and you can do in a matter of minutes. So we've made it, as it says, as easy as 1, 2, 3, literally 3 clicks, and you're running from the cloud to back running on-prem. If we look at this one particular customer environment, they're a dispatch service, so they make calls out and they're an emergency service. So it's very important that they're up and running all the time. Now, one of the problems that they run into sometimes is here in this particular environment, they're actually running Hyper-V, which is kind of an outlier in the virtual environment. Everyone supports fully VMware, full integration and all that, but they're running Hyper-V and we actually support full Hyper-V integration. So not only can we restore back to Hyper-V, back it up agentless, we can also run it on top of our appliance. So that really gives them that easy integration. Now, because they are sprawled across multiple states, it does make it important for them to be able to boot things back up and quickly. And this particular customer has actually done 5 failovers to our cloud since we've implemented the solution. So not only did we sell it to them, they liked it, they're still using it, but they've tested it and used it, and they're perfectly happy with the failovers and the ability to be able to bring their things online inside the Infrascale cloud if they need to.
Thanks,
So
Chris.
let me ask the question: how many VMs does that solution support for that customer?
So this particular customer, I would actually have to look and see how many they have, but that really is a matter of something we're going to get to later when we talk about scaling out our appliances. So we have appliances that for our smaller customers can boot 4 or 5 VMs, all the way up to 20 VMs, and then we can even do multiple and stack our appliances to do further.